So the new electromagnetic frequency of the planet. So the elder said to me, at a depth, the planet produces a charge that feeds the life living around it. And that charge will be altered and changed, producing a new frequency on your planet. That's when we step in to take charge of the new frequency. It will be a dimensional shift on your planet, and you'll have the proper stock of genes to make use of it. And we will do it together, humans and our species. Get this? Do you understand? So in this section, I simply want to explore that the Earth's electromagnetic field, dimensions experienced on Earth, and consciousness are interconnected. So I have an experience going into other dimensions. I had this in 2 contact events. And I was in a dimensional realm where I was in my physical body. So I wasn't in some kind of removed spirit or astral or ethereal form or whatever these might be. I was as a biological form. And I know that because I had a semen extraction in one of them. In another case, I ended up wearing, I changed clothes and wear kind of a different uniform. So the key takeaway when I was in these environments, well, actually, sorry, let me describe them here. So on Hornby Island, my Hornby Island contact event, I had, I went to another planet basically, and it was Venus. And when I came out in the craft, I was able to breathe the air. I was able to be my own biological form, but it was obvious that I shouldn't be able to be in that environment. It was kind of acidic, and there was obviously gas in the air, and it looked like a hellish environment, and yet I was physically there. And the same thing happened in a 2016 contact event, the one where I saw the city, where the elder showed me the city. In that contact event, I'm in the sky, and it seems like I'm quite high, and I feel phased, where I can't feel the air. I don't feel the air isn't thin like it would be with hypoxia and on top of a mountain. Like none of that was there, and it wasn't cold, and I couldn't feel a draft or anything. Yet I was outside and I was in the physical environment. So both of those takeaways are that I'm in this kind of phased space where the environment doesn't affect me, and or that I'm not affected by the elements of the environment. So I want to take those as the takeaway as we kind of move into exploring what this means for us. So the first thing I want to share is the 1947 declassified FBI file known as Memorandum 6751. So it's actually available on their website. You can go to the FBI website, and it's right there. And it's some kind of file, a declassified file about someone's interaction and learning about an alien species. So detailing that aliens are actually some form of extra-dimensional being. So this is the actual document. And here in these parts, someone kind of actually lists down some descriptions about the nature of the beings. So it's actually quite fascinating if we're talking about dimensions and aliens. So in number 6, right up top here, the bodies of the visitors and the craft also automatically materialize on entering the vibratory rate of our dense matter. And in number 8, the region from which they come is not the astral plane, but corresponds to the locus ortalis. Now that's very interesting information, especially if we're talking about dimensions. And so trying to understand what this person means, as far as like what I understand, I'm not a huge, I don't have a huge body of esoteric knowledge myself, but I have a basic understanding, and astral plane is a dimension here on Earth. It's a layer, kind of the layer, if you will, right above. In some cases, I've called it the ghost realm. It's the realm with which spirits would be in, and they are able to interact with us. So when they're saying that it's not, the beings aren't from the astral realm, I take it that they're not from Earth, even in another dimension, but they are from. So when you're talking about locus, which is actually a Sanskrit word meaning world, then they're saying that they're from a world beyond us, a space beyond us. And if you're saying talus, then you actually might be saying a dimensional realm within that realm. So, so a realm like the astral world, but on another planet. That's what it kind of feels like is what's being said. But of course, there's no explanation. But the idea that they could have been from a phased space within their own planet might be something what they mean, or of course, it could just mean a full dimension, and we just can't conceive of what that is. So could all, and so I throw out there, could all planets have other dimensions on them? So is that what this is? We don't know yet, but it's very fascinating. So I just want to frame that for a second there. Now, I started exploring the Missing 411 series, the book series by former police officer David Paulides, who documents strange disappearances of people in national parks and elsewhere. The way in which they go missing doesn't add up. So sometimes people go missing with other people around just a few seconds after watching them, and then there is no trace of them and are never found again. Or when they are found, they are kilometers away in locations that are impossible to get to. The locations where they occur display patterns, which David Paulides calls profile points. So that's all very fascinating. And when we start thinking about dimensions and the idea that that there's kind of realms, you're seeing something that kind of looks dimensional in his Missing 411 series, and sometimes seems to add up, and I'll show and make the pieces here, but adds up with my experience, my personal experience of dimensions and the contact experiences, experiences that I've had. So this is his list of profile points. The ones that are important here for today that are relevant: people who go missing usually do so in national parks, around large bodies of water, or near boulder fields. So there's a geographical component that repeats itself, which is fascinating when it comes to strange missing people anomalies. The missing are found in areas that seem difficult, if not impossible, to reach by foot, or in the time that has elapsed, such as a child being found 12,000 miles away in just a matter of few hours. A common example is children as young as 2 to 3 going missing and being found in high elevations, such as mountains, 2,000 feet in the air. Sometimes the children have their clothes on backwards or inside out, and their parents claim that they can't even dress themselves yet. One of that element there, which is the child being taken and kind of going missing and being able to kind of do things that are extraordinary. So yeah, we'll focus on that in a second. The shoes tend to go missing, either just one or both. Many people are found in bizarre places at high altitudes or in tough terrain, and their socks or their soles with their feet don't have a speck or dirt or wear on them. So they have a sense of being removed in some case. This is true for children as well too. There's no tracks. Typically, investigators do not find any tracks 9 times out of 10. If they do, they seem to stop inexplicably and lead nowhere, as if the person just vanished into thin air. Animal attacks are ruled out by experts. And Paulides will not investigate. So a point for those who are debunkers: Paulides does not investigate cases where, mental illness is involved, or where it looks like the likelihood of the person kind of left on their own, or drugs are involved. So he really does have he tries to really narrow down what are some strange occurrences going on in these missing 411 cases, and then those strange occurrences all do kind of fit a profile point. So it is very fascinating. So I want to highlight just a couple that show what I'm trying to get at here. So in the case of 3-year-old Eldridge Albright, so this was in rural Woodstock, Maryland, on May 21st, 1941. So the case being is that his grandma's house was facing, the back of the house is facing the woods. There's a pathway going down to a creek, and the 3-year-old is playing down by the creek. He gets out of view of the grandma, and then she hears a scream. Basically, she goes down, and the dog is sitting there staring at something, but she can't see Eldridge anymore, and he's screaming as he's being it seems like he's being taken by someone. He keeps screaming, and she can't see him, and he's deep in the woods now. So Eldridge left footprints walking 2 to 3 meters in the sand. Basically, she called the police, and they come and they start a massive search ensues. And what they find is that Eldridge left footprints walking for 20 or 30 meters in the sand on a creek, just on the sand bank of the creek. And then it just stops. So had he gone in any other direction, there would have been prints in the sand. So what it looks like, it's giving the impression that someone lifted him up, but there are no footprints connected to a kidnapper. So I'm making a point here that you have something that took him that didn't interact with the environment, like I had that experience. The child is found 24 hours later, 4 miles away in the middle of a swamp, which had deep water. So an impossible place for the child to get to. Somehow he shows up there. The child didn't even know what occurred. So something happened to the child's memory because he was out overnight for 24 hours. And a 3-year-old should be aware that they were not in the care of their parents and were out in the middle of the night. So there's a weird anomaly of kind of a missing memory. And then on top of it, something had interacted with him that did not interact with the environment, which is very fascinating. In June 16th, 1946, in Devil's Den State Park, Arkansas, 8-year-old Catherine Van Elst went missing, surrounded by groups of people who were swimming and playing in the water. Her father was just watching her, turns around, looks back, and she's missing. She was found 6 days later. So can you imagine the insanity for that parent who is watching their child? Everything seems safe, and then he turns, looks back, and she's gone. And then he starts, "Hey, what happened to my child?" And all of a sudden they assume she went into the water, and they, of course, they drain the dam, and there's no child in there, and it becomes this massive search. She was found 6 days later, 7 miles away, up a mountain, coming out of a cave, wearing only a bathing suit and no shoes. Search and rescue concluded it was probably more like 30 miles, as she would have wandered the forest, as there was no trail to this location. She had some scratches and bug bites, otherwise she was fine. She wasn't dehydrated or malnutritioned, and she didn't remember anything except sleeping on warm grass, and then she woke up in a cave. Very weird, very strange circumstances. Again, not seeming like she was affected by the environment, as she was only wearing a bathing suit and was gone for 6 days. Who knows how she was maintained, how she was hydrated or nutrition, but very fascinating nonetheless. So the whole 411 stuff got me into Bigfoot. I kind of was, it's for those who are looking at it, I think the conclusion starts coming to, is this Bigfoot? And I didn't really know too much about Bigfoot. I hadn't put any energy behind Bigfoot myself. And so I kind of decided I was going to try to understand this Bigfoot stuff. And I do want to point out that actually David Paulides, in a lot of the cases of the missing 411, in some cases people go missing and they're found and their bodies are they're dead. They looks like something has consumed them. And David Paulides doesn't think that Bigfoot is eating people. I just want to say that he actually does a lot of research on it, and it does look like in most cases, observations of this Bigfoot creature, they come off as benevolent. And so it's a very fascinating piece to this and to this whole inquiry here. So in 1967, Patterson-Gimlin film was debunked. Now, for those who, I grew up with the mysteries of the unknown kind of stuff, and I saw this and was kind of fascinated by it a little bit. And then I think in my teens or in the 90s or something, I saw that it was debunked, and I believed that and didn't know that, in fact, it's actually not. A lot of people tried to claim that they were the suit. But when you actually just do, again, you focus on the research, you focus on people who actually research these events, it turns out there are mysteries that are involved. So I focus, when it comes to my research on this stuff, I focus on the people who I feel do a good job at making credibility for themselves, who focus on just research, who don't come off with lots of opinions, and are really just trying to create bodies of evidence. So Bigfoot researcher Jeffrey Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology, has 10 footprints of this creature from this sighting, from the Gimlin-Patterson sighting. The footprint evidence is 10 successive footprints. They contain variation in toe position, characteristics of the foot. The feet show animation that is consistent with a living and responsive foot. They show points of inflection. They're not simple contrivances from carved wooden feet. That's the whole point. This is not you can see the evidence, as he says it for himself, that this is not a fake foot. And in the video, the kinematics of the movement matches that of a living creature, not a suit. So, and yet the debunking is actually from people pretending that they were the person trying to get attention, who were in the suit themselves and saying that they made a suit, though no suit has actually been presented. So, I came to the conclusion after looking at some of the stuff I found on Bigfoot. Actually, I want to point out what I found and who I got that information from. I went to several places to investigate what I could find about Bigfoot. One of my favorites was coming to Les Stroud. I don't know if, for those who know Survivor Man, there was the TV series Survivor Man, and he had several seasons where Les Stroud goes into the forest and he survives for a week with very little resources and has to kind of make everything himself. Very fascinating. And I love this kind of show because, I traveled for 2.5 years. It's part of my story with the aliens. And Les Stroud actually does a Bigfoot series. He actually personally, filming his Survivor Man series, has a run-in with something very paranormal or very strange. And it leaves him kind of very shaken. Basically, the story is, on his account, is he was hearing something break branches and cracking branches and big logs, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. And eventually she kind of gave it attention, and this thing behind bushes was growling, like kind of mad growling. And then as it took off, it destroyed all these logs, like trees were crashing, and yet he didn't see visually trees crashing. And it was this kind of thing that he'd never experienced before, and he didn't know what it was. And then he leaned towards, this could have been this Bigfoot that I keep hearing about. And he decided to do a whole series on it. And he's a skeptic. He's not some crazy guy that believes things. He's an intellectual, and he's a skeptic. And he approached the whole series with that kind of mentality. And it's very fascinating. He does a really good job at trying to, first he puts himself into Bigfoot territory, and like sleeps overnight and sometimes spends a couple of days there, seeing if he can get any type of activity. He does his own research of what draws a Bigfoot, and he gets some strange things on camera, but he doesn't really know what those things are, and they basically come off as paranormal. And then kind of seeing throughout my research, it does seem to be that the Bigfoot leans on this kind of strange paranormal activity while also being a biological creature. So so that's what I got really kind of driven into, is Bigfoot a biological species that can move in and out of a dimensional realm? So first and foremost, there are some locations where there's kind of this constant Bigfoot activity, or at least where they've found they've had some kind of conclusive experiences with a Bigfoot type creature, and there's orbs associated with the area. So in the Montana vortex is just one example. Someone has actually caught on camera strange kind of hairy creature, while people have also videoed orbs there, and it's associated with the same entity, this Bigfoot physical creature that's there while also being orbs. The Sierra Nevada mountain range also has a classic account of someone recording audio of a Bigfoot. And there's a really good story about that. And in that same location, the people who kind of sometimes go there see orbs as well too. And so there's this kind of orb activity associated with this Bigfoot activity. And I find that really interesting because it coalesces with gray aliens and the experience with aliens. That they obviously, there's a lot of stories about how grays can turn themselves into orbs. So I find that really a kind of a fascinating crossover. And when this either a Bigfoot communicates with human consciousness, and they're possibly in an invisible space, like this maybe astral realm or ghost realm or whatever, this dimensional space that I've been to, and seems like in the missing 411 cases, something is interacting in a space where it doesn't affect the environment. If the being is in that environment, it seems to, when it communicates with a human consciousness, express itself as paranormal. And so this kind of strange effect occurs on consciousness that has a paranormal type quality. So James Fry witnessed a very fascinating account, and James Fry also was a really good Bigfoot researcher who's kind of a no BS, pretty straightforward, looking for hard evidence. And he's witnessed an actual floating orb, and then underneath it was crunching, like as if something was crunching logs and big branches, yet he's watching it not crunching anything. It's just an orb floating. So it's giving this impression like it's doing this kind of crunching sound. And that's paranormal. I would say that that's a paranormal effect. And Les Stroud has really mysterious experiences that are paranormal. And he's basically, anyway, he's witnessing things that crash and destroy. Yet he's looking at a spot in the forest that's not destroying. Nothing is changing. Nothing is moving. Yet he's hearing crunch and as if trees are falling, and yet he's not seeing anything crunch. And he can go over there and see no sign of it. Yet he was witnessing it or hearing it. And so again, I'm kind of referencing this idea that an entity is in that dimension, and when it interacts with us, it has this paranormal effect with consciousness. Well, the elder, as I mentioned previously, I have this kind of telepathic communication with the elder. She's still in my life, and though I do see UFOs, I would say she interacts with me in a paranormal fashion way more. And I find that very fascinating. She's in whatever space she's in around my environment, and when she manifests something, it interacts in bizarre, weird ways with my brain, and yet it's some kind of interaction with my own consciousness, and it seems very connected. It's this, as if when you're in that realm and you're going to interact with a consciousness, it's going to come off to that consciousness, the one that's in the human realm or the earth realm, in a very strange kind of paranormal way. This so who knows? But when you're in that realm, can you enter dreams? Because Les Stroud also had an experience where the Bigfoot entered his dreams. And it's very funny because I think the Bigfoot didn't like him being in his territory, but wasn't willing to put himself on camera. So the Bigfoot didn't interact with anything camera wise, but he had a strange dream where he was being sat on by a Bigfoot and he felt the pressure of something sitting on him, and he literally thought he was being sat on by a Bigfoot, and then he scrambled out of his sleeping bag and nothing is there. So he felt this pressure and felt something like actually was on him, and he was like, what the hell? And he saw lights earlier that night and kind of orbs in the sky and didn't know what he was seeing. And he's again an intellectual, so it's very fascinating to watch his brain kind of get scrambled by what's happening. And the Elder has done the same thing to me. She's been into my dreams, and I've heard very clearly people have experiences with gray aliens kind of going into people's dreams. So that there's a very strange interconnection about how those biological species were able to go in this other dimension and how they interact with the human consciousness. Also, when you're in that realm, it seems like the beings are very aware that they can, in quantum reality, there's this idea that our observation has an effect on the physical universe. So could it be that consciousness is very, maybe in this other realm, it affects consciousness in some way? I don't know. It's kind of strange. But Bigfoot is very aware sometimes when it's being observed. And so they know when a camera's been put up yeah, that's just a really strange thing. And I find the beings have that knowledge as well too, that sometimes I've mentioned this before, but I'm looking out into the sky and then I'll see this, then the UFO or the object or the orb or whatever I'm looking at, knowing that I could sense that she was here and then staring into the sky and then it pops. And is that my eyes being gravitating towards the spot, or they know I'm looking now and then they kind of activate? And the truth is humans have this ability also, right? When we're on the bus and you decide to turn and look, and for whatever reason that person on the street was staring at you. So you also know when you're being observed. It just seems that these beings really kind of have it enhanced when they're in these realms. Lastly, in both cases, they seem to be able to interact with electromagnetic frequencies. Bigfoot can turn off cameras. Les Stroud has two scenarios of a camera observing apples or things that they were trying to provide as offerings, and then they just disappear, and the clip is missing. And so something interfered with the camera. There's tons of stories about UFOs and gray aliens interfering with electromagnetic frequencies. So they clearly have this ability. Maybe that's that realm. But so the connecting piece for me here is the paranormal world. And so I went and did research using Joshua P. Warren. I thought he did a really good scientific approach to the paranormal. He's been in it for several decades and he's been studying it. So we know from paranormal investigations that the realm of ghosts, and therefore the realm of the paranormal, including Bigfoot, aliens, and UFOs, is electromagnetic by nature and uses and interacts with consciousness. So we're getting that connection here, that there's an electromagnetic kind of frequency throughout maybe our realm or on the planet, and it's interacting with our consciousness, and the beings like a Bigfoot or a gray alien as such can interact with that frequency, that electromagnetic frequency. We power paranormal experiences with other entities by our own bioenergy. There is powerful electrical activity that accompanies ghost activity. So from this, we know that consciousness does have an electromagnetic effect with the paranormal. So the bottom line, listen, I don't have a lot to go with. I thought this was piles of fun to kind of study it and put it together. So could it be if the beings change something in the electromagnetic field of the planet, we would have a different experience of consciousness? So when she's saying this, there does seem to be, listen, if they have an ability to, well, I guess the connecting piece here is so I'm saying there's a dimensional realm. It seems to be electromagnetic by nature as it affects consciousness. So could there be is this the magnetic field of the planet? Most likely, I guess. We would assume that's where that field would be generated from. There maybe could be an argument of that. Maybe it isn't. I don't know enough about the magnetic fields. But it seems like that's what she was implying when she said there's a depth, a charge in the core that feeds the life on the planet. So if you altered that, it does seem like it would have an effect on consciousness. So there's so much to explore, but it does seem connected that an electromagnetic change on the planet would indeed create a dimensional change of the kind impossible for humans to imagine, yet would require spirituality to understand. So that was it. The elder kind of did emphasize that, you know, you're going to need lots of gurus to help understand for the new change that's about to come, implying that there's a dimensional change that will expand consciousness. And it does seem that there is a dimensional realm here. They interact with it. We do have biological species like Bigfoot interacting with it. And could this be the case? Could something like this happen? Maybe it could. So who knows? So thanks everybody for being here. For those who want to contact me, jeffsilver@gmail.com. And so thanks, Mimi. Let's open it up to Q&A. Great.